Where do you want me?
Anywhere you want.
I've heard, not to put pressure on, but many people say that this is one of the best interviews they've ever had.
All right.
Oh boy.
So, bar is there.
We are the library club at Sabino High School, and we're going to be interviewing Gayle Forman on the book Afterlife. Sorry.
Nessa's ready to jump in.
Yeah.
She's like,
So my first question is, what sparked the idea of Afterlife? Anything specific in your life lead you to write this book?
yes. So the book started when I just had this image of this girl sort of riding her bike home from school one day, and she was super, super average, and she gets home and things are a little bit weird and off, and then she sees her mom and her mom screams, and I knew that she was riding her bike home even though she had been dead for 7 years. So that was my immediate image that sparked the book. But I realized as I was writing it that it was sort of coming from an area I think I often revisit, which was the story that inspired If I Stay, which happened way, way back. We're now talking 2001, so 24 years ago, which is when two of my best friends and their two kids were killed in a car accident. And one of the things that I sort of learned back then is that we don't really do death very well in our culture. I grew up Jewish. I am Jewish, and in Judaism, we don't really spend a lot of time thinking about the afterlife. The importance of being a moral, ethical person has to do with this world and the rewards in this world, which I really appreciate for ethical grounding. But it meant when that happened, I was like, I'm either never going to see them again, or I'm going to see them again after I die, which I hope isn't a really long time. So I wasn't prepared for what happened next, which was I had these dreams that felt like visitation, and my husband and I were driving in New Zealand, and both of us looked at each other and were we felt the presence of one of the friends. And then it really kind of hit home when I sat down to write If I Stay, which the mom and the dad and Teddy and If I Stay are literally my friends. And I realized when I wrote that book, it was like they were in the room with me, and it was so beautiful. It was almost an ecstatic experience. And I was like, oh, this is how you survive loss. And by then I had done a little bit more reading and research into how other traditions do it, where they don't have this huge wall. There's a veil and you can kind of pass back and forth and you keep the ancestors and the dead alive. But I really realized that when I wrote If I Stay, and I truly felt like they had come back to life. So I wanted to kind of explore that with Afterlife, with this book about this girl who dies in a hit and run accident, and it has an impact on all these people around her. And you can sort of see how some of those people really are not surviving her loss very well, and other people are. So it kind of goes back to that original story that sort of then inspired If I Stay, that sort of 15 years later inspired this.
So you said it was a really beautiful story for you to write. I know that some authors go through writer's block. Did you ever experience that with this book, or did it just come out very naturally for you?
With Afterlife?
Mm-hmm.
Good question. It actually, lots of writer's block. So I started Afterlife as well as about 5 or 6 other books in a period, I would say, about between 2016 and 2017, where I wrote entire drafts of books that I then thought, oh my God, these are terrible. They're all terrible. And I started to get into a panic, and I thought, I just can't do this anymore. The skill that I have, I've lost. And in fact, this phrase kept going through my head, I have lost my way, which wound up being the first line in the book that got me out of that. So there's a book called I Have Lost My Way, which literally opens with a character who's lost her voice, saying, I have lost my way. In retrospect, I now understand that I was going through a period of pretty significant anxiety and depression. And so some lifestyle changes, some Lexapro, some other things have helped me. And so a lot of the books that I thought were terrible turned out they were great drafts of books. And so Frankie and Bug, Afterlife, Not Nothing, We Are Inevitable, and the book I'm working on now all were started during that period. But what was sort of a paralyzing writer's block also turned into what I think now is a much healthier way to write for me, which is write a draft of something and then go away from it. So I have a dog. He likes to take his bones, right? And sometimes he'll take his bone, he'll go bury it, and then it'll snow, and then it'll thaw, and he'll bring it back in. And I feel like my stories are like that. They need to season. They need to soften. And then when I return to them, they are there. And with Afterlife in particular, it's so structurally complex with the way all the threads come together that I think had I tried to write that consecutively, it would have been really hard, because when you're in the middle of a book, it's like you're in the middle of the forest and you need to be able to pull back, and time does that. So I often tell students this story because I know myself was like this, like revision, which you have to do in school, like is almost universally hated. Probably, I would guess, because the first draft is so difficult and such a pain. You're like, I just want to get far away from that. It's like, but that's the hard part. And if you can give yourself a little moment to kind of like give yourself a day or two and then come back to it, you see suddenly, at least for me, I see all the things that need to get done, and that is the best part of writing.
Yeah, I was definitely curious about why you chose the structure of Afterlife, where one chapter we would be in the present, and then we would go all the way back 20 years and then 8 years. And I was really, like, when I was initially reading it, we read part of it together because we're best friends and thought that this would be, like, a good book to read together. But we were like, should we take notes?
What the hell is she doing? Yes. Gayle, come on.
Yeah, we were like, should we like structure, should we put it all back together? But then kind of by the end of the book, it was like, and then when we were talking outside now, we were like, oh, that, like, it kind of all came together in the end. But did you have like was it initially structured that way, or whenever you went back, were you like, this is what this book needs to be?
It was always, I always knew that I wanted to have it go back and forth, because one of the things I wanted to explore beyond the sort of how we grieve of it all was this idea that all of our lives have like meaning that we can't necessarily see. Like the metaphor I use is like, picture a pebble dropped into a pool, and you can see the rings that it makes immediately, and then they start to become less discernible. And I think that our lives are like that. We can see the impact we have on the people closest to us, and maybe as those rings go out, we can see, but they start to become invisible, and maybe there are impacts that you have in your life that you will never know about, and maybe it's people that you barely know or don't know at all. So I really wanted to kind of pull back and look at her death and life sort of through the community lens. And in the original draft, there were even more people. I had to kind of consolidate some of them, but I knew I wanted to do that. And, I think that's another area where the time is great, because like when you're in it, it's just like in certain things, like I knew that the second chapter would be the photographer who took her senior portrait. But because it all kind of weaves and comes back and forth, that time and space to be able to kind of come back to it allowed me to sort of see it sort of more globally and understand like this should go there, this should go here. But I definitely knew I wanted to do it that way. The trick was making it work narratively so that you were pulled along in the present tense chapters, as well as understanding what was going on in the past tense chapters, even if you didn't understand why you were understanding or what you were understanding.
Sure. While you were writing, did you go back and forth like that, like as you were writing through the book? That does make sense.
Yeah, it does. You mean, did I write chronologically?
Yeah. Did you write in order? Like
I
that?
do. I can't not write chronologically, which you would think with, some writers, like one of my best friends is Libba Bray. And if she'd written this book, like she would have written all the sort of the extra character chapters in one thing, and maybe the Amber chapters out of order. I can't write that way. Yeah. So it's like, there's just like this little intuitive sense that when I get to end of a chapter, it's like I know what's going to go next, at least when things are working. When things are not working, that doesn't happen, and then you try and force it, and that leads to a lot of wrong turns, which is why I don't force it anymore. I used to just sort of sit there and be like, I must work 8 hours a day. But just giving yourself that sort of space for the intuition. But for me, it only works chronologically, and even when I know where an ending is going to be, to get to that crescendo of feeling that I want for an ending, if it's not scaffolded correctly, it's like, it almost feels like cheating. Yeah. So sometimes I'll be like almost at the very end of a book, but I'm like, it's not quite right there. So I will go back and make sure that all of that sort of leading up and up and up, so it's sort of amping until you get to that climax feels really there, because I want to have that energy while I'm writing it so that you will have it when you're reading it. And it doesn't always happen in the first draft. It sometimes happens sort of late in the game, but I will never let a book go until I've gotten to that place where like the flow state takes over. Because otherwise I think I'm writing a book that bores me, and then I'm definitely going to write a book that bores you.
Do you have any specific like processes you do to like get yourself into like the mindset of when you write these books, or like, because for each book you have to like know each different like character and everything and their own world. So what do you do to get into their mindset?
I think about them. They become real people to me. And I think in my earlier days when I was younger, I would like workshop it. It was like I would get to know them as I'm writing, and that obviously happens a lot. But increasingly, I just give myself the space to stop and think about it a little bit more, so that like they're fully realized people to me. And when that happens, it's great, because if you know who your characters are, the plot kind of works itself out because you know what they would do. You know how Amber would react to a certain thing. If you don't know that, it's much harder, because it's like they could do this, they could do this, they could do this. So increasingly, like that's one of the great things about writing the crappy draft and putting it away. The character's not fully formed yet. Maybe the plot's not fully making sense. But when I come back to it, probably I have more of a sense of that. And then it's just like suddenly it was like a roadmap that's been in invisible ink, and then suddenly it's visible. And it's such a good feeling. I'm working on a revision right now where I'm just like, this has to go here, this has to go here. And it's just delightful.
It's like a bulletin board where like everyone's like tiny.
The murder board. Yeah.
With those, like with your writing process, in your books, there's a lot of emotional scenes, and I mean, that's hard for audiences to process, but how do you push through it to keep the book being relatable and hopeful?
I'm going to push back. Is it hard? Or is it...
I think it's uncomfortable at first.
Oh, really?
I feel like because it's emotional, and I think that's what people are uncomfortable with. So.
I mean, maybe what you're talking about is our discomfort with feeling our feels, which is if I sort of think that there's a reason I'm put on this earth, it's because I think we all should... We should not tamp down what is there, because that never... it's not healthy. It doesn't do good things for us. And that's not to say that we should all be like drama queens all over the place. Like, it's good to learn to regulate your emotions. But I think in order to regulate your emotions, you have to be honest about how you're feeling. So for me, because I feel that way, when I've tapped into something quite emotional, even if it is a painful subject, it feels satisfying and cathartic to me. So, and I think that is why my books tend to have the impact that they have on people, because I'm not faking. There's nothing that I hate more than a book that makes me feel something that is undeserved, where it's like, I know I'm being manipulated. And usually with a book like that, I'm not going to feel it. But when they get through and I'm like, this is trauma porn, and I'm feeling feels, but they're not earned, I want to throw the book against the wall. So I really want it to sort of be real and authentic. And, I know that people talk about my books as sad girl books, which makes me laugh, because the characters in my book, except for I was here, and maybe just one day a little bit, but particularly the young women, like the Allison and the Mia and the Amber of it all, they have these full, rich lives. They have the kind of lives I wish everybody would have, like interests that make them passionate, a family that loves them, romance, if that's what you want. Like, they have this. And then I come in with my bulldozer, right? But before that, these are not sad girls, right? These are happy girls. And the reason I come in with my bulldozer is not because I'm a sadist. It's because I'm an optimist, and because I think and maybe this goes back to what you were saying about trying to discomfort with feelings. We try and hide from the fact that hard things are going to happen in our lives. We try and think that we can protect it, and we cannot. Grief is the price of admission for living and loving, right? You're going to love somebody in this life. You're going to get hurt somewhere. You're going to lose something. And I write these books because I think sometimes the fear and anticipation can be so overwhelming, and I want to show people that when these things happen, and they are tragic and they will hurt, there is unexpected grace, there is unexpected resilience, there is unexpected support and meaning and even beauty. So that is why I like take these happy characters and then like kneecap them, or in Amber's case, like literally kill them.
I think sometimes kind of the bulldozer is what makes you go back stronger whenever the foundation is not, you know, when it's happy but it doesn't have the strength to go through things.
Of course.
I think definitely for me, like, I don't think books like this are sad girl books because I think they're honest books. I think that they're very real and that everyone at some point will go through something that they do not want to go through or deserve, but the outcome is always stronger than what you started off with.
It's about resilience.
Yeah, for sure.
And there's a lot of research about how novels in particular, there's a connection between the people who read novels and people who have a lot of empathy, and whether it's empathetic people are drawn toward novels or whether the novels help to create empathy. I think it's probably both. But there's also some research suggesting that reading novels can help with resilience, because especially if you're young or if you're not young, it allows you to sort of vicariously experience something difficult and feel some of the feelings. It's almost like an inoculation, right? And it's just like, then you get a little bit of an antibody here.
Microdosing.
Exactly. Microdosing on sadness. I love that. And so, you know, that's what I want. And I want, you know, I sort of late in life, I was talking to somebody who's like, superpower is not your ability to get over pain, it's your ability to sit with it. And like when things are bad, just to be able to be like, this really sucks. And just like accept that and be okay with it and know that it won't be forever. And similarly, like when you have friends who are going through something like that, I am a person who loves to fix it. So it has been a lesson for me to learn that sometimes I just have to sit with somebody when they tell me something and just be like, that really is awful.
Yeah. I mean, I kid you not, like a week ago, we've done the exact same thing. I read this book while I was on the plane visiting my long distance childhood best friend, and the whole time I was just thinking like about how I would react to going through something like this, and how like how in some ways I would be a Missy and like try and keep everybody together, but in some ways like it's hard to keep everyone together. But I think like
especially
no, you're good.
Yeah, especially when in the book, the first few chapters when she just came home from school, mom just kept on screaming.
Yeah.
What?
Yeah.
Yeah. Even also, she just got over the death of her.
Yeah, you know, like with the mom, it was tricky because people like, wouldn't a mom be so happy to see her child again? But if that loss nearly killed her, it's like, and she never developed that strength that Mia was talking about of like something breaking and growing back. She's still so brittle that she thinks she can't survive it again. So, and also just like she can't believe it. She's lost her faith. So I know some people are just like, why would the mom be so upset? But I don't know. As a mom, I found it realistic that she would react that way. Yeah, she's like, there's no way, and I'm not letting myself open to this because it can't be real.
Yeah, even though when the mom wanted to get connected with her daughter once again, and once that finally happened, she just started like staring off into space in her own room.
Yeah.
And locking herself in.
Yeah.
She's gone crazy, ripping out her hair.
Yeah,
and that.
yeah. Until that moment where she's like, okay, you're here. I don't know how, but
It's happening.
we're and then when Amber leaves them again at the end, like the mom can, that's the whole point of it, so that she now will be able to.
The strength.
Yes, she now knows how to keep Amber in her life, which is where that strength can come from.
So a little earlier, you were comparing your other character, Mia, and Amber. You were talking about they were like happy girls and you just bulldoze over them. What do you think makes Amber stand out specifically?
I wanted Amber to not stand out. I wanted Amber to be as average girl as I could imagine, just like a sort of basic white girl. and I wanted it to be like, there's a reason that book is not set in any particular place, and as much as I possibly could, which is very hard with the technology of it all, I wanted it to not be set in a specific time. In fact, if you know, when I look at it now, it's like, it's so clear to me that I was writing this book in 2016 because you subtract 7 years and like Netflix was still coming in envelopes, right? Yeah. And it was different social media, and Oprah would have been on TV every afternoon and she would have had a landline. So I really wanted Amber. Mia is exceptional, right? She's this incredible musician. when you read about her, maybe she's sort of aspirational, but Amber is more like the Allisons of the world in just one day. And because I that's exactly it. I didn't want her to be somebody who had been incredible. Like, this is not like Malala who's coming back to life. This is just Amber. Like, and even she realizes it. She's like, she didn't even pick up litter. She was mean to her sister. Like, why her? And that seemed essential. Like, that it shouldn't be her. If it didn't make sense, generally, it really didn't make sense with Amber.
Was there a specific way you wanted people to take Amber? Because we were talking about it when we were out there, and we were like, she kind of seems not like a good person. Like, she seems mean. But we don't know if that's how you meant for her to come off. Because towards the end, she realizes that she was mean when she was alive, and that wasn't the person she wanted to be. And did you want her to come off as kind of a bad person, or did we just...
I wanted her to come off as a 17-year-old who had, and I will say, I have a 17-year-old daughter and a 20-year-old daughter, and I do think that your generation is just so much further along in terms of like your emotional intelligence and your empathy and your way of looking at things. But when I was growing up, 17, 16, 15, like, those girls could be mean, right? And petty and self-centered, because you are evolving and you are learning to be a human. So when Amber comes back, like, she doesn't think she's been dead. She doesn't feel dead. She feels like her. So her big concern is like, if I'm 17, is Calvin 25? And like, can we legally be together? Does he still have a girlfriend? Like, this is what she's thinking. And she's just as bitchy to Missy, who she calls Missy initially. But, I wanted there to be some evolution from Amber in her brief time back, as well as sort of the people around her. And one of the things, I got asked a question yesterday is if your character could give advice to other teenagers, what would she say? And Amber assumed that she had the time to become the person that she wanted to be, and put off basically having the kind of relationship with Melissa that her mom has with Pauline. And you don't necessarily, you should put off things like that. You just do not know. And that's not to say that there's an expectation that everybody should be perfect all the time. I think as people, we should be allowed to make mistakes. We should have people around us who can like say to us, hey, that was really crappy, to be able to hear it and apologize and move on. And there's a whole other book, my middle grade book, Not Nothing, kind of is a lot about redemption, because I think, again, with your generation and the way everything is happening sort of live for broadcast, like how little room there feels like for error without being just like canceled or just vilified by everybody. Amber's kind of a bitch. She says so to Missy. She's just like, how could I have helped you? But she did. She did help Missy, Melissa. And Amber comes to sort of see. And so, yes, short answer is like, she's an unfinished person. Yeah.
Exactly.
I mean, I hope I grow until I die. Because I feel like otherwise I die while I'm still alive, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because we're always evolving.
We're always evolving.
We weren't created perfect.
Yep.
And with your books, is that your purpose to like show us that we need to take advantage of life and our opportunities? What's your main overall purpose for your books?
I mean, my books are about sort of specific stories with specific things. I just think like to be able to hold conflicting ideas in your hand at the same time. Like right now we are living in a time in our country where I am like, I cannot believe what I am seeing happening. I am terrified for what I see happening. And at the same time, I am coming this weekend. I have created so many beautiful connections with people that I have met, and just like sparks of love with people who were strangers. And that is so beautiful. And both of these things are happening at the same time. And so I feel like embracing all of that, embracing all of the complexity of it, and making sure that you don't let the scary, awful things cancel out the love. Because like, it is so cheesy to say like love is so important, but I was just talking to an educator about a Michael Pollan book, and he has this book about how to change your mind, which is basically like looking at the use of psychedelics. And there's this area where like people who are terminally ill they can take psychedelics, and it can really help with that sort of process, because you kind of understand that this is just one plane of existence that you're exiting and heading somewhere else. But like almost to a person, they all come back understanding like love is the important thing. And it's become like the source of like every cheesy pop song, right? But it is so true. Like, you know that feeling when you connect with somebody on like a beautiful level. Like, that to me is like the nourishing lifeblood of everything. And I think books are wonderful because you get to experience love vicariously just from reading a book. But I guess if that's what I want to put out into the world, that's, you know, across the world, across all the books.
I think you succeeded.
Yeah.
Oh, well, I'm still doing it. We're all evolving, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, one of my favorite, like, one of the books is, like, Amber's lit teacher, and why he just, like, doesn't think that, like, when the kids are writing their own obituaries, like, it's not a morbid thing. They're just, like, trying to, like, think of, like, the best things that they could accomplish in their life. And I feel like, have you, like, do you feel like you've, like, become that successful in your own life? And, like, what would you say your obituary would be?
Oof. Good question. I love Mr. King too.
Yeah.
And it's so funny. I'll take a little detour, but like when I wrote If I Stay, that love story between Mia and Adam was like, I was very much reliving the love story with my husband, Nick. Like, he was a young punk, like I was young. And when I first wrote that book, Adam was called Nick, and I showed it to Nick. He's like, I can't read this. I gave him a new. And then like later on, I wrote like a book called Leave Me, which is sort of like a middle-aged love story, right? And I'm still middle-aged, but like I'm now getting like Mr. King. I'm like writing the romance for the old person because he gets a love story. But in terms of like what I would want my obituary to say, like, you know, I don't think I would want it to talk about my success, I'm making air quotes, as a writer. When I was at my most successful, like when If I Stay, the movie came out, I was probably at my least happy. I talked about that anxiety. I had like a scarcity mindset that this was all going to get taken away. Guess what? It was. Everything is cyclical, right? And I am probably at my happiest now, when I would say I probably sell less books than I ever have in my life, or since If I Stay. And this is the time where I feel like I am doing the most important work of my life. I get to do these school visits, which are wonderful. I get to do things like this, the connections I've been able to make individually. It feels like just the ripple effect, the little, you know, pebble in the pond, like it's a good ripple. And, you know, I suppose if I wanted my obituary to say anything, it would just be that I've come to realize that the answer to almost any problem I can think of is to add more generosity, however you want to define generosity.
I love that.
That was a good question.
Thank you.
I think like your success with If I Stay like allowed you to have these opportunities, and I feel like that's an important message for so many of us, especially now moving into college, that like even though there's all these things you're supposed to be doing or all these paths you can go on, that like at the end it's what impact you've had on your community. And same with you, Jen, the fact that you have all of us here. And
Oh, don't cry.
don't do that.
It's like when I read If I Stay, the Monopoly piece.
I was there.
Look, I think it's legit to worry about like earning a living, right? Like we live in a very rugged capitalistic country where it's just like sink or swim, and it's harder and harder to swim these days. So like it is true. But what happens is you get caught in a mindset, and like my mantra has become I have enough. And it's just like whatever happens, like I have enough. Like the If I Stay movie, like I have a retirement account from that. And like it keeps me like I still want certain things, but then when I don't get them, it's like I just remind myself I have enough. I have enough. And I think it's been such a nice place to be, and we're so taught to strive for more and more and more that to just be able to be like I have enough. It's so freeing.
For sure.
Yeah.
A saying that I love, because what kind of reminded me of is like when people say that you're rich in life, but like by the people that you're surrounded by and the things that you've done.
Love.
So I think that like it's perfect for like you feel rich in life.
I feel so rich in love, and now I just got to meet you all amazing, and you're incredible librarian. Like I just like I'm feeling it inside of me, and like this is just this is the thing. This is the antidote to like all the other things that are not great. So thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
Did you see yourself, like, when you were, like, young, did you see yourself making this big of an impact on people, or in life?
I still forget that I do, right? And then, I was walking and I stopped at there's one of the stands is like a cannabis place. I'm like, are you selling cannabis here? And the woman was like, wait, it's you. You're the only author I want to see. She's a retired teacher, and she and I met in Chicago. And so just, it blows my mind when stuff like this happened. And no, when I was a kid, I had no idea. I wanted to be a dental hygienist. No, really what I wanted to be when I was really little, like, this sounds so delusional, but I wanted to be the sun when I grew up. Like, literally the sun. I would tell my parents, but I want to be the sun. And my dad once said to me, if you're a boy, you could be my son. I was like devastated, but like, I literally wanted to be. So, I mean, I hope that doesn't mean like I'm a narcissist and wanted everybody to revolve around me. But needless to say, like, I didn't know that I was going to be a writer. And even when I became a writer, I didn't know that I was going to have this impact. When I wrote If I Stay, I saved it on my hard drive as in, why not? Because it was my third published novel under my own name, fifth published novel because I did 2 books under a fake name. And nobody had paid attention to anything. And my editor, who I'd been working with, had left editing, and my agent, who I'd been working with, left agenting. And I started this book that felt like it was not a viable commercial book at all, but I had to write it because I was just so happy to be with my friends again. And I saved it as why not on my hard drive. And I remember when it started to kind of go out into the world and I started to get like emails back from foreign publishers about how it impacted them. I was blown away. Like, that was just a moment of like, wow, books really do connect us. And with this book, I was a little worried about writing about losing a child. I haven't lost a child. It's my greatest nightmare to lose a child, right? So I thought, like, what is this going to be like? And the first bunch of emails that I've gotten back have been from a lot of grieving parents. Now, maybe I'm not hearing from the grieving parents who hated this book and found it too triggering, but that you touch a chord, you've touched a truth, and you've reflected their truth, which brings people comfort and shows us that we're not alone.
I mean, you've metaphorically become the sun. You fulfilled your dream. You're letting light into the world. So I feel like you've actually accomplished.
Okay then.
Your child.
Well, it's funny when my hair used to be red, and there was a kid at my this boy Rufus, who I love, but he used to call me the mean mom with hair like the sun. And now I'm the nice mom with hair like the moon.
That's so cute.
Yeah.
I feel like you're also like your vibe or your personality kind of fits with the sun too. Because like ever since you walked in here, it's been just like, just like shining.
Well, I'm just reflecting the light that you're all giving off. So thank you.
Thank you. Other than, because I know you talked about like your friends and their kids being killed in a car accident. Were there any other like real life experiences that you like were input into the book?
Into afterlife? I mean, I feel like every book is just sort of all real life experiences, right? So, with afterlife, I'm trying to think. Like, that one probably more distant than others because, like, first of all, this is a Catholic family, so that was, like, research for me. Amber's the kind of girl that I was not in high school. I was like, we had the drama in common, but, like, I didn't sort of have boyfriends and star in the school plays. And although I will say that the real big thing that I poured into this book, as well as I would say, like, We Are Inevitable and I Have Lost My Way, is the sibling relationship, because I have daughters. And I'm very close with my sister, but seeing my 2 daughters go from like being obsessed with each other and fighting constantly to becoming each other's rock. So I think that sibling relationship really is at the heart of this book between Melissa and Amber. So again, sort of taking things that aren't happening to me directly, but that I've sort of witnessed with the girls, that for sure was a huge part of this book.
Yeah, I did have a lot of like similarities and stuff into this book because like I I have like 2 sisters, and I was raised Christian and Catholic, so you did a good job as Jewish. So I was like, when Amber's perspective, like, is this hell? Like, because she can't remember like anything, like what's going on, like why does she deserve it in the moment? Like, I really was, because like I used to always be like, what? Why? Like, you know, when you realize in the moment, like, you're alive. Like, because like it feels like so weird just to be like, what am I supposed to be doing right now? Like, am I even important? Like,
yes.
So I feel like that this book was really good, and like I internalized a lot of it.
I'm so glad. I mean, am I important? Did you guys ever think about this? Because it blows my mind. Like, get to like the human biology of it all. Like, how many eggs every woman carries in her ovary, right? How many sperm there are with every single shot, right? The fact that like that, I know it's getting a little gross, but like that sperm connected with that egg to make you and 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 me, like that's a freaking miracle, right? Like it really is. It's bonkers.
It's crazy how many eggs are in the human body.
Yes, like you could have been any other person, but you're you. It's mind blowing.
Thanks, fake mom. Is there any like other genres or themes you would want to explore in the future?
So I started a dystopian in 2016 as therapy. I don't know why I would have wanted to write a book about a world in which women could be controlled in a way that certain people might want them to. Sorry, token man in the room.
Sorry, Carl.
Yeah. So I wrote this book in 2016, and it was just so like completely off brand for me. And also like back then I was like panicked. I can't do something so different. I can't. And then it just kind of felt like a lot of books like that came out, and The Handmaid's Tale came back. So I put it aside. And then here we are again. And so that's the book that I was telling you that I've been revising and having so much fun with. So it's called...
We'll be reading it.
Yeah, so we haven't even sent it to a publisher yet. It's called Orchid Girls, and it could be a whole series. I have no idea, but it's been super fun to write in a different world. It's also like double the length of my regular books. My books are usually like around 60,000 words, and this book is like 105,000 words, which is...
Wow.
So, yeah. So when I finish with you all, I'm going to head back to the hotel. I'm going to grab my laptop, go sit by the pool, and keep revising.
Well, we're excited. Let us know when it comes out.
Yeah, I will.
I'll definitely be checking it.
It's been so fun, though, to just, like, write in a different world, you know?
Is your writing process different with that, or is it much more or less the same?
This one feels more plot-driven in a way, and like I feel like I'm so meticulous with my books just to make sure that like I've threaded things in, and I tried to tell myself, I'm like, just make it easier this time. And to some degree I am, and to some degree I'm not. And to some degree I'm like, no, I have to see this here. I know exactly where it should go. And this is like the joy of seeing it all. So it's sort of same but different, you know?
Yeah. Like we're ready to say a question.
Yeah.
I do actually. Who inspired you to like become an author?
It's so interesting because I did not grow up wanting to write, even though I grew up writing and making stories. Like before I could write things down, I would like make up little poems. Then when I was in kindergarten, we did this thing where back then, like you would recite a story and they would type it up and then you would color it. My stories were always just like, my parents joked that it was crazy social services didn't come because they were all about like kids being locked in closets while the family went on vacation. And then I had one story, which I wish I could find the original, but I remember it's a little girl and she explodes. And the last lines are, she went pop, and then she said, amen. So, like, I have been writing my whole life. And then I was an exchange student when I was in high school. And then I came back from that year and told my parents, I shall not be going to college. I am going to the University of Life. And I did. I went traveling for a couple years. And then I decided I was going to go to college because I wanted to go work for Doctors Without Borders. And I got to college and I did pre-med for a couple of semesters. I'm like, I don't really want to do this. And then I just started taking, like, random classes. And then I started taking journalism classes. And I was like, oh, travel, which I love to do, writing, which I love to do, and asking strangers things that are none of my business, which I love to do. So I did that, and I loved it. It was an amazing job. And then I had my first kid, and I couldn't travel, and I had like a bunch of stories get killed, which is where they're like, we don't want you to do this anymore, even if you've done all the work, we're going to pay you 20%. And I was like in a panic, and I had written my first book. My husband and I traveled around the world, so my first book was a nonfiction sort of travel memoir. And I called the agent at the time, and I'm like, do you have anything? Like, I don't know what to do. Do you have any ghostwriting, which is like where you get paid to write something but has someone else's name? And she said, well, I have this young adult project, but you'd be better off writing your own. And I had worked at 17 magazine, so I had written for young people for much of my career. And that was on a Thursday. And by Monday, I had like the first 12,000 words of my first young adult novel. And I will tell you, up until that moment, it never occurred to me to be a novelist. Up until taking the journalism classes, it never occurred to me to be a journalist. It's so obvious in retrospect, not only that I would do this, but that I would write about and for young people all of my career. I've always been drawn to that. But no, I just kind of like backed my way in. Because I was broke, which is like a terrible reason to be a writer.
I am curious, I know it's kind of off topic, but what's your favorite, like, I shouldn't be asking this, none of my business question? Like, do you have a go-to?
I don't. I love meeting people like randomly and just, so lately, because I want to get an electric car next time I buy a car, like every time I do an Uber, I do Uber electric. So usually I start, in New York, all the car service drivers are all professional drivers. Most of them are born outside the United States. So I just always ask them about their cars first, like how are they liking it, blah, blah, blah. And then we wind up getting into like incredible conversations sometimes about, there's one guy that I talked to, he was getting like his degree in sort of business. And so we were talking about the sort of politics of it all in like this deep way. Last night, the guy was from Tanzania, and he moved here from Brattleboro, Vermont, and he's getting his law degree. I'm like, oh, your parents must be so proud. And he was sort of laughing. And so I don't go straight to that kind of question because that's insensitive, but I am endlessly curious about people. And, I have a friend who I met. She's like one of my best friends, and we've literally only been together 5 times in our life. But we met when I was doing an article in Pakistan, and she was the photojournalist, and she lives in the United States. And, like, I went out and visited her when I was in Texas, like, last month doing an event. And, like, she did Hajj in Saudi Arabia, and I was just like, tell me everything. And like she spent like 2 hours taking me day by day by day. And I was just that kind of thing. It's like reading a book for me. It's like that's an experience I will never have. I'm not allowed to have. And I loved hearing about it. So I just think other people are just so interesting, Because I could easily turn the tables and just start asking all of you about yourselves. So what brought you to want to join this particular club?
It just seems a lot of fun.
Yeah,
that's pretty much it. It just seems a lot of fun.
Have you read things you wouldn't have otherwise read?
Oh,
Yeah.
Mostly murder mystery books are my favorite.
So did you know that you liked true crime before? Yeah, so that's always been your thing. Yeah.
Yeah, I know with this book, I'm like a Stephen King, like I love scary books, but this like I was first introduced with this book with your work, I was like, oh my gosh, like very thought-provoking and very much brought me into like I really like this type of genre books that make me think of like deeper.
I mean, I always say I don't like a certain like type of book, and then I read a book that I love. Like I don't like fantasy, but then somebody put a fantasy in front of me that I love, and I'm like, okay, I do like fantasy, right? So I just don't like the fantasy where it's like 70 pages of world building, and they'll say, oh, but you have to get through the world building to the good stuff. And I'm like, I'm sorry, if you need 70 pages to get my attention, you've lost my attention.
Yeah, sorry.
I am a very tough reader, so I do what I call the first line test of a book, and I will pick up a book. And it's not like I will veto it based on the first line, but I usually can tell if something is going to be special by that first line. And so I apply that to you all. Like when I'm writing for you, like I have to earn it, right? I don't want anybody to have to slog through one of my books and think it's boring. If it's a boring book, then I either haven't done it right or it's not the book for you.
my little sister, she wants to become an author too. She's writing like a bunch of like heaven and hell stories and true love, but forbidden and all that.
All right, tell your listener, I have a little book like that too. So we're working on the same. We'll see who gets there first. That's amazing. How old is she?
She's 13.
Yeah. I mean, like I had a journalism professor, and she had a note on her door: a real writer is one who writes. And I just sort of think like that's how it works, right? You write because you love writing. You write because the story compels you to come back. When you're a professional writer, that's not to say like every day is like puppies and roses, but like there's something too that's tugging you to kind of come back. So I love that she's already doing that.
Do you ever have like certain inspirations, like when you start writing, like how do you get your ideas? To like come, or do you just like randomly things pop into you and you start writing it down?
I mean, with this one, it like this image came, but I always like to talk about books as a Reese's peanut butter cup, because the peanut butter is the premise, and it's, if you can think of it as a what if scenario, right? And so like with If I Stay, the what if was like, what if, because it was the real sort of inspiration for that book was not just that my friends died, but that the 8-year-old boy who was actually named Teddy, who I loved, he had lived longer. And so by the time I heard about them, they were all dead, but he'd been medevaced out. And that was the part that just tormented me, like little Teddy alone on a chopper, the rest of his family dead. And I always wondered, like, did he know and did he choose? So that's the peanut butter. That peanut butter has been swirling around in my head for years. And then one morning, like 7 years later, I wake up and there's Mia. She's this dark-haired, dark-eyed cellist. I knew nothing about the cello. That's the chocolate. That's what makes the book go. It's the collision of these questions that are going in my head and a character. So with Amber, they kind of collided at first. And I think that had been a question that had been there a long time. But this idea of like, what would happen if this dead girl came back, and Amber was right there. So that one I sort of sat down and started going.
Would you ever make a movie again? Would you want to go through that process again?
It's not up to me. Obviously, I would love to make a movie again, because that movie, which, I enjoyed working on all of that, but like that movie brought that book to so many people. Like, my goodness, is it a really good advertisement for a book? So it is, it was great to have that made. It's just like Hollywood is, we don't really have a choice. The only choice we can do is we can say no. We can say we don't want you to come, but it's not like we can be like, hey, how about you make this into a movie? And even when they say yes, there's so many up downs. And so, I have like one project that has kind of inched its way forward, but it's so enormously expensive to make anything like this. And particularly movies now that they're not in movie theaters anymore. It used to be all these different ways you can make money from it. And now it's all these tech companies that have their own way of doing it. So it really is out of my control. But I would love it, and I've written a couple of scripts, and it's so much easier than writing a novel. Oh my gosh. I don't know why like screenwriters or on TV shows, they have like rooms of this many people to like write something that we have to write on our own. I'm like, y'all are lightweights. And then they get catered lunches. I'm like, sign me up.
Maybe you teach them a class of like how this is
No,
done.
I want to be in a writer's room, because I'm like, I don't care if I'm the low one on the totem, low person on the schedule. Like, I don't care how low I am, because I'm just like, it's all spitballing of ideas. Somebody else will rewrite it, so I don't have to worry about it. And there's catered lunch. Yes, please.
Have you tried like going to
The project that is moving forward, I have, if it moves forward, I will be in the writer's room. But it still has many hurdles, and I'm sorry to be secretive about it, but I think we're going to announce it in the next couple of weeks, so you'll see. Yeah.
Do you have any questions this morning?
I'm not allowed to ask questions. If I were, I would ask.
Theoretically.
I like this workaround here.
Just the grandfather in If I Stay.
Yeah.
Sometimes in your life you want to conjure up tears, and that has been my go-to ever since I read it, because, oh my goodness.
Hello, duck.
Talk about ugly cry.
Yeah.
Ugly cry.
Yeah. And I think that was the ugly cry in the movie too, the one that really got people.
Yeah, it's funny. I had read the book and then somebody said it. I was like, really? It's a movie? I had no idea. I had read the book so many times. So I guess I really don't have a question around it except for just the comment of, do you enjoy making people ugly cry?
The truth of it is I have a rare genetic disorder that if I do not get a daily infusion of reader tears, I will perish. So I do not enjoy making people cry. I wept all through that book. So I think like anytime I wept, you're going to weep too. Or if the places that you were weeping, you can be guaranteed I was weeping too. Mm-hmm. But I don't. But I also think, and I've run out of them, but I've been giving out little tissue packs that say Gayle Forman made me cry, and all I got were these tissues. And if you give me the address of this school, I'll send a package to you when I get home. Yes. As well as some of the other goodies that I sold out of. But, I've lately been thinking about crying and how we, again, back to your earlier point of like discomfort, like we are taught, don't cry. And I step back and I'm like, okay, evolutionarily, as far as I know, we are the only animal that when we are in pain or we have an overwhelming amount of feeling, both positive and negative feeling, salt water leaks from our eyes and we have this like heaving thing that happens that afterwards you generally universally feel calmer after. It is this like incredible regulating mechanism that we have been given that I don't think any other animals get, and we're told not to do it. And I'm like, that's crazy. Which is again to say like maybe, well, I don't even want to say like, because crying is regulating your emotion. If you need to have a little cry to regulate your emotion, then cry. Mm-hmm. So I don't enjoy it, but I think it's healthy that we do it.
Mm-hmm. And your books just happen to cause the
the Greeks did this. They had these plays, like, I don't know if you've read any, like Euripides, like Medea, or like those were meant to bring people together in large groups to have these emotional reactions, because the idea is that a catharsis like that is cleansing. It's like a storm, but after the storm, there's calm and there's blue skies. And it's just almost like this way that you come together and you have this story that makes you sort of exorcise your demon, so to speak, and so that you can carry on with life. Like it's a very old mechanism. So I think that a cathartic cry, like, it feels good for a reason. We crave it for a reason. People look at you side-eye sometimes because it's like you're doing it for teenagers and like, are you trying to torment them? But we get that like y'all are more in touch with your emotions than we are, because at a certain point you get a memo that's just like, don't feel your feels. Rip that memo up. Ignore that memo. But like, we are providing a service, and I think that's why a lot of adults like the YA novels, because it's like they need this too. I know I need it. My God, when I saw Wicked, I was wrung out. I did not expect to cry that much because I've seen the play, and I was like one of those people. I was like, why are they doing it in 2 parts? Why does it? And then I was like, every single minute of it I loved, and that dance scene, I was just like literally ugly crying in the theater. Yeah.
I guess you would.
Oh yeah, you do. Yeah, you do.
Similar to what you were saying earlier with like sperm and eggs, and how it's like these biological systems and processes that we have that are beautiful and real and like amazing, and it's just become like a concept to our society to shun or make it into something it's not.
Who told us to do that? Because that creates shame, and shame is the most corrosive thing in the world. There is no good from shame. Guilt is a good thing. Guilt is your little conscious being like, oof, that didn't feel good. Shouldn't do that. Should apologize. Shame is a whole different thing, and I think you can point to a lot of the evils in the world and sort of dig down and you'll find shame. You know, when there's all this research about sort of death row murderers, like a lot of them had serious shame early in their life. And this, when it corrodes and corrodes and corrodes, it goes to some not great places.
I know we were talking about like the ugly crying and everything, but I love when books actually like evoke emotion, because like you're not like being thought-provoking and actually like triggering like an emotion from you. I feel like the book would be boring because it's just like
Yeah, or even if it's just even if it's making you laugh, like when you have a really good laugh, you feel kind of the same as you do have a really good cry. It's still that like, yeah.
Because I feel like if it's just like words on a paper, it's not gonna do anything.
Like you're in the book.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Whoa.
It adds to the experience while reading. It's just like amazing.
We talk about this a lot, where there's like a level of consciousness that some people are able to reach and some people don't reach that. And so, like, there's a level of consciousness when reading a book where you can relate to it and like you feel things and you can tell that the author has that same level of like experience in life. And sometimes you read a book and you're like, I don't know what we were going for with this, but I think your books definitely have that, like, you want people to have emotions, and sometimes it's scary and uncomfortable, but that's what gets you to that higher level where you can have conversations like this and make connections like this, where you just like can feel it and you're constantly thinking about the way of life rather than just rolling through it.
One of the things that makes me very cranky about school and literacy is this confusion with something being hard and inaccessible and being valuable, right? And I look at Charles Dickens, who's great, but I remember being in high school and like it was so boring to me. Yeah. And Charles Dickens during his time was an insanely commercial writer. It's just the style and the writing makes it a little harder to access. And so why are you creating that obstacle? Why aren't you looking for things that young people can access and can use to draw connections into their life and into the larger world? So, I think I'm happy when people can find texts that resonate. And I think that's why it's been so important to also find more diverse texts so that people who can see their own lives reflected. And you can also see a life that on some ways is very different from your life, but also has some commonality reflected.
Yeah, I think people...
Do you have to go anywhere at one?
No.
Okay, good. Yeah. Keep going.
Yeah.
Sorry.
People focus a lot on the classics, and they've kind of like gotten away from what made them classic or made them in the past. And I think it's like, oh, we need to teach this to our youth and stuff.
Yeah.
They just go straight there. It's like you don't realize that it has to be a process with them, especially if it's. You talk about this a lot, where it's like forced education.
Yeah. Well, it's like in math. Like you wouldn't start a 7th grader with trig, right? Or calculus. Like there's a scaffold up. So why shouldn't the scaffold up to more like complicated texts get people? I mean, reading it's a skill, and it's a skill that like the book I'm listening to right now is called Stolen Focus. It's a skill that we're losing because of the way our attention is so fractured. It's much harder to sit down and read a book, and I've definitely went through times where I haven't read, and then it's just like I have to relearn the skill. But like, yeah, why wouldn't you try and, I love the best librarians and teachers. They're like the best pushers. They're like, psst, hey, I got something I think you're gonna like. First one's free, and then they're addicted, and they're all free because of the library. But I think like that is what you want to do. You want to give people a love of reading so that they're willing to maybe try something different or try something or not. I don't care what people are reading. Stephen King is fantastic. Read Stephen King your entire life. It's delightful.
That's why I think young adult is so important. Even if it is just like silly fun, or if it's not, it's that like foundation that you're building within yourself, and it's just really important.
And to have this ability to just like 26 letters and some punctuation marks and like put that in front of your face and disappear into a world, escape your own world for a bit, lose track of time, try in somebody else's existence. Like what a miracle is that,
To go back to when you asked us about like why we joined Library Club, well, I joined because Miss Mola, before she was a librarian, she was an English teacher, and I had her, and like nothing to say there's anything wrong with the classics or anything, but she actually gave us books to read that were thought-provoking and actually like wanted you to like think it through and actually take it apart, and like instead of like the Odyssey, we read like Eleanor Park. Yeah. And Fahrenheit 451. I almost said 551. But it was just, it's like getting to read other books and like read other experiences and instead of just like the same old.
And enjoying it. Like
Yeah.
learning that this is a thing you like as opposed to seeing reading as a chore.
And of course, those end up being the banned books, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, we'd like to say thank you. Thank you.
Thank
Gayle
you all
Forman.
so much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
We enjoyed this so much.
Yes.
Me too.
It was
really
nice.
nice time talking with you.
That was great. If you give me an address, I'll send a bunch of goodies to the school.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
All right.
Thank you, Carl.
Oh, yeah. This is my favorite book.